Suppose you're looking for a job, or your child is looking for a job, and they're qualified, overqualified, perhaps the most qualified applicant, maybe not by much, but at least as qualified as the next person. And they don't even get a call back. And it turns out that the reason is because your child, or maybe you, are disabled. Uh, I'm disabled, and I have seen this happen. It has happened to me more than once. And looking back, in start at early when went to college at the University of South Dakota in Springfield, back before it was a prison, and I took electronics technology, something I had always been interested in. I'm a bit of a nerd. If you look behind me in this video, you'll see that I am a nerd, and my house, maybe a museum to the computer industry or the personal computer industry. All kinds of hard drives and things like that behind me, and I still do work in that industry. When I went to Springfield, um, I'll be honest, I wasn't the best student in the world. I got by. I had uh, did what I needed to some extent. I really enjoyed the electronics classes, and I did pay decent attention to those. But even those, I wasn't as attentive to, and didn't work as hard as I could have and should have. The other classes, I'll be very honest, I didn't do a very good job at. I didn't even really try at all. Um, and I didn't go to class as often as I should have, and in some cases not very often at all. And after a couple years, I left by mutual agreement with them. I wasn't doing very well. My GPA wasn't very good. My electronics courses were pretty good, um, above average, but not, way above average. C's and B's and a couple A's. And I went out into the real world and looked for a job. And I applied at a number of different places, uh, electronics jobs. And many times when I applied, I was more qualified than anybody else applying because I'd had some electronics, and many of the others had not had any electronics at all. And in most cases, I didn't even get a call back. I didn't even get an interview. I did a couple times, maybe did a phone interview. And then when I went there in person, all of a sudden they weren't interested anymore. And I tried some things. I tried to do an electronics store on my own, working on repair. And it really kind of came to me one time when I had was scheduled to go to someone's home and work on their television, and I had talked to them, and what they told me the symptoms were and what it was doing, I knew very well that I would be able to fix it for them without a lot of work or anything, and that I could handle it. But then before I was getting ready to go, when I was just going almost out the door, they called and said that they had gone a different route. I later learned from a mutual acquaintance that they had found out that I was handicapped, and they were concerned about me being in their house and maybe falling and suing them or something like that. And at that point, I decided maybe that I needed to be better. I couldn't be as good as the next person coming along. It didn't matter because I was not going to get the job. And you can have all the laws that you want, but the bottom line is, very often, maybe most often, they're going to take the next person coming. So I went back to the University of South Dakota at Springfield, again, before it was a prison. Turns out just before. And this time I decided I was going to do better. I was going to really try. I was going to go to class every time. I was going to work hard. I was going to try my best to be at or near the top of every class. And that did not just electronics, but other classes as well. and it turned out that I excelled. I tried very hard and I made sure that I got to class. I did well. Um, Things kind of changed with Springfield and stuff, and I ended up going to the University of South Dakota in Vermilion for a year, and I also ended up going to, then after that, when they closed Springfield, one of my programs transferred to SDSU in Brookings, and another one transferred to Dakota State down in Madison. I ended up going to both schools for a year, graduated from both, actually, literally on Saturday at SDSU and on Sunday at Dakota State with bachelor's degrees from both. And I realized something along the way, that I couldn't be as good as the next person. I had to be better, noticeably better. And one of the things that happened was it happened to hit at the right time that computers were really coming on and becoming something. And my first computer class, and from that class on, I knew that this was my place to be, because I realized that I had a gift, if you will, for computers. Part of that gift came from the fact that I was disabled, and I had to develop some techniques and to get around things, to deal with things, being disabled in a world that wasn't all that friendly towards disabilities and access. I had to spend time thinking about ways around things. Well, it turns out those were the very traits that were needed to be good at computers. The type of planning ahead, looking beyond, looking at the next thing to do, always keeping that in mind, along with the patience and perseverance that I had to develop to get by, made me not just as good as the next person with computers, but better, noticeably better, much better. And in the end, that really made a difference. But it tells me something, that the disabled often are in that position where they have to prove themselves. And it certainly made me a more dedicated employee. That knowing that I had to prove myself, that I had to prove I was better. And I think a lot of disabled really feel that and make some of the absolute best employees that you can have. And as we're coming into the National Disabilities Employment Awareness Month, I think it's time to stop and think about that. And when we look and see that many of the disabled are some of the absolute best workers you will ever have, dedicated, hardworking, want to do the job, want to please the customers, and very often come to it bringing some joy that they spread around them. I'm not going to say that that was me, that I was that, happy disabled person that many may or may not be. But I know that that's true, that many are just happy to have a job, happy to be a productive part of society.